Welcome back to the Graham Stephan Show. So have you ever wondered how and why the rich just keep getting richer? Well, as it turns out, there's a lot of secrets and some inner workings that you probably haven't thought about that are exposed here today in this documentary. It's just titled, How the Rich Get Richer, from DW Documentary. So with that said, you guys, I want to comment on it as soon as you hit the like button and subscribe, because most likely there's a lot of things in here that you've never even thought about before. So with that said, let's begin now.
Never before has there been as much money as there is today, and rarely has money been so cheap. And yet the central banks continue to pump money into the world. We're being flooded by trillions of dollars and euros.
You know what? The one thing I have to say I'm not a fan of is just the really sinister music. Because if you just put happy music over this, or like adventurous music over this, it changes the narrative entirely. They make it seem like printing money is like this horror movie. It's like a Saw movie where someone's trapped and has to like come up with a contraption, except in this case, it's literally just, they're lowering interest rates and printing money. I don't think that quite deserves like the horror aspect behind all of it. It's not that dramatic.
Savers are losing billions every year, thanks to low interest rates.
If you just open a savings account, it's almost like burning money.
Yeah, I don't think anyone's really ever saving their way necessarily to like a multi-millionaire status. You can't save your way to becoming an Elon Musk. Savings is for exactly that. It's just in case of an emergency, something comes up, to pay your bills. That's about it. Everything else long-term should probably be invested.
Karl-Heinz Eich, a recently retired court bailiff, knows all about money and debts. His life insurance policy is due to pay out soon. How should he invest the money? He and his wife want security in old age.
See, the thing is, most likely, if he's looking for retirement, he needs something that's stable. He can't be investing 100% in equities because that's going to fluctuate a little bit too much. He's probably got a good 30, 25 years left in him, so he needs to make sure his money lasts. So usually as you get closer to retirement, you want to pick safer, more stable things. So most likely in his case, he's going to be putting, I don't know, maybe 30 to 40% of his money in equities like stocks. Maybe the rest could be in some bonds and treasuries, and then a small portion of that, maybe 2 years of living expenses in cash. That way, he's kind of covered across the board. He's not necessarily trying to like grow his money and like 10x it on Wall Street bets, just trying to keep it safe and stable. So usually when you're young, you go more into equities. When you're older, you play it safe. Pretty simple.
Karl-Heinz has always led a modest life. He always stayed away from investments that paid high returns but were risky. He never thought it would come to this. He doesn't know what to do with interest rates this low.
See, it seems like a fundamental problem of him not understanding investing. It's like, yeah, you want to stay away from high returns. Okay, that's fine. Don't take unnecessary risk. Don't invest in individual stocks. Don't invest in a lot of volatility. But there are plenty of ETFs out there that cover a broad range of options that track the entire market long term. A lot of these things usually average anywhere between 6 on the low end to about 10% on the high end over like a 20-year period. It's pretty good. For him, though, it seems like his investment is simply whatever the interest rate on a savings account is paying, which is terrible. You don't do that.
Some have told me they won't keep their money in a bank account anymore. Instead, they'll deposit it as physical cash in a safe.
Now, this guy's real old school. If he's taking his money out of the bank and putting it in a vault, at this point, I'm surprised he's not just like going all in gold, precious metals, silver. I'm surprised.
Interest on savings is almost zero, at just 0.01%. That means that he gets 1 cent for every 100 euros per year. What's happening with his money?
Yeah, but it's stupid though. It's like the same thing. It's like, oh, he keeps his money in cash in a vault and he makes no money on the cash with like crazy music going on in the background. Yeah, no, to me it just seems so obvious, and probably for you guys watching too. My thought at this point is either this is being twisted for the narrative that like, oh, this poor old guy is not earning a ton of money in a savings account, which you don't do. Or he just doesn't understand investing, and I have a feeling it's probably he just doesn't understand investing.
The cheap money is supposed to fuel growth. The money has to go somewhere, into shares and real estate, which continue to rise in price. The result is a massive concentration of wealth right at the top.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, the people that have the money to invest. They're the ones where when everything is going to crap, everyone's panicking, those are the people who have the discretionary income to say, you know what, I'm not worried about losing my job. Not worried about not making my payment on the house that's already paid off to begin with. I got everything I need. I have all this extra money. Gonna invest it. And because they invest it, they get such wild returns because they're investing at the bottom. They ride things to the top. It's just about whether or not you have the discretionary income left over to invest. The rich people, in proportion to their necessary expenses, they got a lot of extra money, they invest it.
705 trillion, that's the value of all derivatives, the speculative financial bets on the future. They've got almost nothing to do with real goods anymore. To recap, this is the fortune of Bill Gates.
Yeah, it goes to show you just how much debt there is out there. And that's the thing, we kind of finance today with the expectation that, tomorrow we'll pay for it. We'll see. We could probably push that out at, 20, 30 years and expect, okay, the debt's going to lose some value with inflation over the long term. We're expecting things are going to do better but at some point, it's got to come to an end where you just can't take on any more debt. Unless the world just gets that much better, maybe it might, but it seems like population has somewhat slowed down. People are getting a lot more efficient at what they're doing, so we gotta really step things up if we want this debt to be paid off.
Economist Max Otter says the biggest danger is that this flood of cheap money will split our society. It moves money from the bottom upwards, he says. A gigantic redistribution machine.
Says the guy in the Mercedes S550 being driven around in the back seat. He's the guy to listen to.
This flood of money doesn't just save states and banks, it also favors the rich, who use this cheap money to buy shares, companies and real estate with rapidly rising values, while the financial investments of ordinary people lose value.
Yeah, but they're also taking on the risk that those investments could just as easily lose value. Look at anyone who bought Peloton above $100 a share, and now it's $4 a share. Like anything you bought in the tech sector, 2021, early 2022, chances are you're down substantially. So anyone who took on debt, who kept the debt to buy tech shares at their peak, they're down. They lost a lot of money on that.
Alf Townsend has lived through it all. He's been driving a taxi for 54 years. He too has profited. But in exchange, Alf has to live far outside the city centre. £1 million for a single-room apartment? No ordinary local can afford that.
Nah, and that's the problem too. If he's driving a taxi, there's only so much he can make doing that. I mean, that's the reality of it. He's not able to scale his business. He's only able to earn when he's working actively. There's so much competition right now for drivers. So, there's only so far you could go on that, unfortunately.
Geraint Anderson was one of London's financial stars. He now lives in Wales. He paid the same for his farm as he would have to pay for a tiny single-room apartment in downtown London.
I mean, that seems kind of like the dream, right? You could work in the city and then eventually retire off to a farm in the middle of nowhere, and then no one's bothering you. That's the dream. Again, just not having anyone pestering you for anything, not having neighbors. That's all it is.
You have a system where ultimately no one's really got the money that backs up all the money that's being lent out. Subsequently, when that system comes crashing down, then it's good night.
No, they're never going to let that crash down. That's the reality. The bank's going to step in. So basically what this is called fractionalized banking, where basically, let's just say you're a bank, okay? I could give you $1,000. You're only required to keep 10% of that on hand. So that means you have $900 that you could lend out. So now let's say you lend out your $900 to another person. Well, that person's only required to keep 10% on hand, and they could, lend out the other 90%. Well, you could keep going on that until pretty soon people are leveraged up like 20 to 1. Now, the chance of that collapsing, it depends on what they're investing in. If someone's an idiot and investing in something stupid, well, yeah. But most of the time, they're investing in really safe treasuries and bonds and things like this that are pretty much as close to guaranteed as you could get. A lot of them only lend overnight, so they get overnight rates depending on what the Fed sets that at. So they're not going and speculating on Dogecoin or anything like that. But I guess, hypothetically, it's possible. But if that were to happen, I almost guarantee that the government's going to step in to bail people out.
In the past, the world was a veritable paradise for savers. The economy was booming and interest rates were high, even if inflation was too. Nevertheless, successive generations lived by the motto, Those who save get more out of life.
Yeah, it's not really true, though, because again, if you're just stashing money away in a bank account, you're not earning anything on that. It's just, then you're at the mercy of whatever the bank pays. Not a good way to live.
In the 70s, we got a fixed rate of 7%. For a short while, we got 11%.
Yeah, but inflation back then was like 15%. So it's not necessarily a one-to-one here. It's not like you were making more money back then. The spread between where inflation is and what the bank is paying you is pretty much always going to be about on par. So if they're paying out 10, inflation could be 12. If they're paying out 8, inflation could be 10. You get where I'm going here.
Karl-Heinz Eich has an appointment with his financial advisor at the bank.
Next year, a life insurance policy will mature. What can we do with this money?
The advisor wants to know about her client's readiness to take risks. He's actually more risk-averse.
Good. She's asking good questions. How much risk you want to take? Very little. Okay, well, then you split it up over a few sectors. You put more of it in less risky assets and, and then a little bit in some risky assets to give you a little bit of growth. All I think he should be doing is maintaining plus a few percent. That's all he needs to do.
Karl-Heinz Eich has to participate in the game of the big financial world. It's an industry in party mood. Big companies are buying up competitors thanks to low interest rates, thereby increasing their share value.
Yeah, I mean, again, what's the alternative? He's not going to do that in a savings account at all.
WMF has been based in Geislingen in southwest Germany. It used to be in the hands of German owners and shareholders. Its operations meant security for thousands of families. Then the financial gamblers set their sights on WMF.
Yeah, but sometimes they have to agree to be sold. I mean, if it's a private company, unless they're being traded on an open market and someone comes in and buy, usually they have to agree to a sale. Okay, it's not that common that someone's able to just take over a company and buy it out because they feel like it. So there's someone sitting there thinking, now's a pretty good time to sell, and they sold.
KKR used 100 million of their own capital and borrowed 560 million from banks. 4 years later, KKR sold WMF to French household equipment maker SEB for 1.6 billion, a deal supported by very low interest rates. KKR made a profit of 940 million euros after repaying the loan.
Fantastic investment. I mean, they did a good job, whatever they did. When you look at it on paper, this is a good investment.
In the 1980s, Margaret Thatcher deregulated the banks in London. Bill Clinton did the same later on Wall Street. Chancellor Gerhard Schröder in Germany then also bought into the deregulation philosophy. Money was to earn money and thereby create growth. The global casino was open for business.
Yes, some of the logic behind that is that by deregulating some of these industries, they might be able to grow a little bit more, help the economy, help employment. Employees might make a little bit more money in the process. So, that's the mindset. But you also have to think, well, were they bribed? Were they bought out? Did banks offer an incentive? Did they lobby for this? It's probably a mixture of both.
Money is created when someone goes to a bank to take out a loan. The bank opens an account and issues the funds. It's then in a contract with the individual who's taken out the loan. The bank hopes that person will pay it back someday. That means the original impulse to create money comes from private banks.
Not really, though. The private banks are limited then by what the country is able to offer, or what their Federal Reserve is able to give them. A bank just can't say, all right, we want $100 million, type it in. All right, click enter. Oh, there's the money, done. The money has to come from somewhere. So it's a mixture of the government, the Federal Reserve, and the Treasury, all working together to make sure there's enough money in the system to keep flowing. So if people want money and they're qualified, they'll get money.
There's an initiative here that advocates reining in the Swiss banks. Only the national bank should be allowed to create money. The initiative is fighting for fully backed money and an end to the privilege of big banks to generate electronic money.
Yeah, the downside to that, though, the economy will shrink. They got to be prepared, though, to take a hit on their income and to potentially lose their jobs. Because as soon as companies have less money to lend out and people have less money to borrow, people are going to contract. They're going to spend a lot less. they're going to conserve resources, and their jobs might be on the line. So that's just the reality of it. So they also have to think of that possibility.
Private banks would only be allowed to issue loans if they have the money in their vaults, 100% secure. Private banks would not be allowed to create deposit money anymore, and the profits from this privilege would also benefit the national bank.
Oh yeah, that's not going to happen. That's wishful thinking. Come on. At least if you're going to make a suggestion, at least have it be, a possibility of happening. No bank is going to have 100% of whatever they loan in reserves. It's not going to happen. We got to come back down to earth here, okay? Maybe we could argue 25%, not 100.
We're at the Impact Hub in Munich, a space for companies that have innovative ideas for the future. New technologies, sustainable solutions for our problems. But there's no money here.
Yeah, because it's a startup. Usually these are the ideas that are seeking capital. They're the ones who need the money that the banks are out there loaning.
Laurin Hahn and his team are working on a car for the future. It's an inexpensive and highly eco-friendly electric car. Developing the Xeon costs money, and no bank wants to stump up this money.
Yeah, because it's a high risk of failure. You know how much money it costs to build a car like this? He could be spending tens of millions of dollars. Minimum, just to get something, just to get a product out there. Something like this, a bank will look at this and see that's too high risk. These cars are a dime a dozen. Everyone has an idea for an electric car. Very few of them ever work. Getting demand for a car like this, getting it actually on the road is going to take a miracle. I wouldn't invest my money in this either. I mean, maybe, throw $100 at it and see what happens. But going to a bank and getting a serious loan, having nothing to fall back on. I mean, imagine you come to a bank and say, hey, I want to build an electric car. I have $0, but this is going to be the future. And look at this cool AI modeling thing. The bank's not going to do that, because what happens? You spend all the money. The bank has no recourse to get their money back. It's gone. So I kind of see the bank's point on that.
I don't think anyone will come out of this situation unscathed. We've been living on loans. It would be enough if we just returned to what we had. Highly regulated financial markets and a banking sector under control, and whose purpose was to serve.
I bet he's a blast at parties. Imagine him just talking about the collapse. You just have a beer with this guy and just constantly, oh yeah, this collapse is loans, man. These loans, these low interest rates, the rich. They're getting richer.
States have to reduce their massive debts. It's the only way we can curb this deluge of money and break through the spiral of loans. That's also why we need international debt conferences, where states mutually waive their debts.
I mean, at the end of the day, what they're going to do, if they can't pay the interest on whatever debts they have, they're just going to raise taxes. My thinking is that always just assume taxes are going to be going up in the future. The rate we have today is probably going to be the lowest that you're going to have 20 years from now. Listen, I could be totally wrong. I hope I'm wrong. But realistically, I think taxes got to be going up.
The interests of the financial industry have determined developments in politics and society for far too long. Trump and Brexit mustn't be allowed to fuel that even further. Money is far too important to be left to the banks alone.
So let me know what you guys think of this down below in the comment section. I will do my best to read as many of them as I can. Also, be sure to hit the like button. And don't forget, if you guys want all the way up to a few $1,000s worth of free stocks when you make a deposit, I got a paid affiliate link down below in the description. Feel free to do it. It's going to take you maybe like 10 minutes to sign up, but you could get all the way up to a few $1,000s in free stocks. So it's a good ROI. And it just takes your time. So enjoy. Thank you so much for watching, and until next time.